Hey girl bosses, a lot. Just a lot. To put it short, I graduated college, moved to New York, worked as a clown, and now I live on my own. Hopefully we'll be having a lot more videos coming out more frequently now, but who knows? If you want all the details, there's a little TikTok video linked in the description, but if you don't care, let's just get right into it. Now, Paladins was my first hero shooter game, and the first character I mained is in the ring today, so get ready for a super fun episode of Paladins vs Overwatch. Orb-Slinging supports Moira vs Seris. Just want to state that, as usual, this is all my opinion, which is 100% infallible. I'm never wrong, but you're more than welcome to try and defend your fave in the comments. Now for their lore. Moira, the immoral geneticist. Moira Odiarain was a scientist who was quickly making great strides in the community. She had discovered ways to help heal people at alarming rates and even push them beyond human capabilities. But the research she had done to reach these breakthroughs was shunned. Her methods were unorthodox at best, inhumane at worst. Her lack of morality with her experiments led her to be shunned by her peers. Her work was dismissed as an example of repeating the past mistakes that brought about the Omnic crisis. But even the darkest swamps see daylight, and Moira's daylight was Blackwatch, the covert ops division of the more publicly friendly Overwatch. With funding to push her forward and no ethics to hold her back, Moira was able to make her research a reality. She even managed to use some of Dr. Zegler's work to develop her own twisted combat suit. Now a lethal field medic, Moira has taken morality into her own hands. She directly decides who will live and who will die. Seris, the Oracle of the Abyss. Once a normal girl, Abby lived peacefully in the town of Seris with her sister, Sarah. But a portal to the Abyss had opened up in the middle of the town with an insatiable hunger. The ruling magistrate decided that a sacrifice was needed to satisfy the Abyss, so Abby was randomly selected to be the lamb. Sarah fought for her sister, but was left behind with nothing but a strand of Abby's hair as a gesture of sympathy. Vengeance festered in Sarah, while fear grew within Abby. As the ceremony commenced, the portal had an unexpected reaction to Abby. The Abyss didn't desire a sacrifice, but a vessel. A powerful abyssal lord took over Abby's body. The takeover was so intense it destroyed the town of Seris in the process. Abby's body, now a shell for the Lord, named itself after the town it destroyed. Seris is a being of immense power and persuasion. She convinced a Pyre Lord to change allegiances, a magistrate general to doom his own army, and continues to weave her will into the realm. Some great and terrible fate known to nobody but her. This is honestly a tough one. Seris is one of the few characters in Paladins who has remained relevant in the lore for an extended amount of time. She's a part of the earlier roster, many of whom have been left behind. She's what I like to call a lore vomit character, someone who has connections to almost everyone else in some way. Moira, on the other hand, is so fascinating. Delving into how much scientific progress can be made when ethics are left behind is a really interesting concept. I also want to mention that it's funny that this pair has ties to the other pair from my last support video. Funny how they all ended up together. Moira is absolutely an interesting character, but she is more or less flat. She has no morals, end of story, you know? Sure, it's unique and different, but in the end, she's still a bit one-dimensional. Seris is more mysterious. Her allegiance shifts here and there, sometimes being shown with the magistrate, sometimes with the Abyss. I think that her knowledge beyond morality is more interesting than no morality at all. Point Seris. Holy shit, a Paladins champion won the lore category. Wah! Round 2, smash or pass. Now, I'm not personally super into women, but I can objectively say both are absolutely a hit. They're both dark, twisted, and seem like they'd be into some freaky stuff if they were to get into stuff. Honestly, I think the last thing on either of these ladies' minds is sex. Still, both good at smash, cause yeesh. Point both. Round 3, abilities. Inhand Weapon. Seris's in-hand weapon is Soul Orbs. Seris fires slow-moving, magical projectiles that pierce through enemies. They deal damage and place a Soul Orb stack on the enemy, with a maximum of 4. Moira's in-hand is Biotic Grasp. Moira saps the life from an enemy within range, auto-targeting and dealing damage while healing herself and gaining biotic energy. Both weapons are really unique, and both revolve around sapping the enemy's energy to fuel yourself. I'll get into it later with Seris. However, from a gameplay perspective, an auto-aim ability is just not fun to play against. And this is coming from a Moira main. It really doesn't take a lot of skill to do well with it. Whereas Seris's slow-moving projectiles offer more skill expression and synergize well with her kit. Point Seris. Healing ability. Moira is able to heal her allies with Biotic Grasp, but yellow. Moira sprays her allies with a beam-like projectile that applies a short healing over time effect. It's able to heal multiple allies in range and requires biotic energy. It's a good note that it cannot heal through enemy barriers. Seris heals her team with Restore Soul. Seris channels healing to an ally, which branches out to nearby allies, healing them for less. Restore Soul requires line of sight to activate, but it can be broken afterwards and still continue. It can be modified to a burst heal with her talent, for an extended cooldown as a cost. Since line of sight is all you need, this does work through shields, although not enemy physical deployable barriers. Both of these healing abilities are a little trash, honestly. They're spammable, but they're hard to get value from without either putting yourself in danger or leaving another ally in the dust. Biotic Grasp is good because it encourages the player to deal damage to heal more, but as a support, having your healing be so line of sight dependent and based on a resource is cumbersome. Restore Soul is powerful, but falls off late game due to anti-healing. However, Restore Soul has much more range to heal faraway allies, and while you're locked in the animation once you start, you can cancel it if you need to fire or do something else. I think the range and lack of resource management Restore Soul offers gives Seris the edge here. Point Seris. Let's move on to each champion's field management ability. Seris helps her allies besides healing them with Rend Soul. Seris detonates all Soul Orb stacks on enemies, dealing damage and healing herself for 12% of her maximum health per stack. Enemies with maximum Soul Orb stacks are stunned for 1 second. This ability can grant her movement speed, restore her ammo, and even increase her damage and health with her talents and cards. She even has a talent where enemies take more damage for a few seconds after she deals max stacks damage on them. I don't know. Moira supports her team with Biotic Orb. Moira launches an orb that can either heal nearby allies or damage nearby enemies. The orb slows down when near a target, and it bounces off of surfaces. Dealing damage with Biotic Orb charges Moira's biotic energy. Both of these abilities do a lot and are awesome at giving their characters a lot more viability. Rend Soul can make Seris an incredibly formidable opponent who can handle her own. When played right, it turns her from a heal bot into a damage support that can be very slippery and oppressive. Biotic Orb, on the other hand, really lets you play around with Moira. While the orb is healing, you can be doing damage or vice versa, or you can do both at once. The way you bounce the orb is also wonderfully satisfying when done right, though it can sometimes fall flat. Most of the time, I end up dealing most of my damage with the orb so I can spam heals on my allies. Rend Soul lets Seris do a lot more than simply healing or dealing damage. It makes her able to survive on her own, and if you time it right, you can really mess up a retreating enemy. It also synergizes really well with her ult. The moment I decided to main Seris was when I ulted the enemies in the training zone and then used Rend Soul in combination. I love that synergy so much, it just spoke to me. While Biotic Orb is a fantastic ability, Rend Soul has way more versatility thanks to Seris's loadout system. Honestly, it might be a bit too much, but we're not here to discuss that. Point Seris. Next up is each champ's evasive ability. Moira is able to escape a tough situation with Fade. Moira becomes invisible and invulnerable for a brief moment, increasing her jump height and her movement speed. Seris's evasive ability is Shadow Travel. Seris also becomes invisible and invulnerable, and moves faster, though not as much. This goes on for a longer duration and also refills her ammo. Some important notes: Fade is instant, whereas Shadow Travel has a short activation time before Seris is fully invulnerable. Also, in Paladins, invisible enemies can be seen when very, very close up. For how similar these abilities are, they're played very differently. While Moira is spamming her Fade to reposition every few seconds, Seris needs to save Shadow Travel for an emergency escape. She can make it into a faster flanking ability and reduce her cast time, but it's most often used to save herself. Fade gives Moira a lot of vertical mobility as well, which Seris severely lacks. The short cooldown also makes it quite versatile for an escape or an engagement tool. Shadow Travel, on the other hand, can make Seris slippery, but if you have enough speed and game sense, you can outsmart it. That cast time is only 0.8 seconds, but it's still a significant amount that, if not planned around, can leave you dead. Fade helps Moira out in a lot of different ways and is much more reliable and versatile. Point Moira. Now for their passive ability. Seris doesn't technically have a passive ability. I always just consider the fact that her soul orbs stack on enemies as a passive. Still, it's worth noting that everyone in Paladins heals when out of combat. Moira's passive ability is the support passive, where she regenerates health out of combat faster than others. So, I mean, technically Moira's is better because it takes less time to activate, but like, it's the same thing. I don't know, I'll give Moira half a point, I guess. Half point, Moira. Lastly, each champion's ultimate ability. Moira's ultimate is Coalescence. Moira fires a beam of poisonous and healing energy. This beam pierces allies and enemies, dealing damage to enemies and healing allies. If Moira is stunned or otherwise knocked down, the ability ends. It can't be cancelled once started, so Moira is locked into Coalescence once it begins. The only ability Moira can use is Fade, which gives a short pause to Coalescence. Seris's ultimate is Convergence. Seris launches her Soul Core. Once detonated, it pulls nearby enemies in, stuns them, and deals a tiny amount of damage. It can actually be reactivated to detonate it in mid-air. Convergence is one of those abilities that is pretty useless on its own. It really requires your team to be paying attention to get value. That being said, Seris on her own can still do a lot of damage and get a full stun on the entire enemy team. It can also be used to yank people out of position or even off the edge of the map. I've only done it once or twice, but sometimes you can yank the enemy team off the point in overtime and end the round. It's so fun. Coalescence, though, is so fun to use and get value from. I always love how the mentality for it is target enemies and heal your allies who happen to be in the way. The fact that you can't cancel it is a bit of a letdown, but I think it's a great ultimate that benefits Moira's identity. Also, Convergence and Seris as a whole can be countered by getting crowd control reduction in the item store, and its limited range can lead to some failures. Point Moira. Final verdict. Seris, 5. Moira, 3.5. In the end, this verdict comes down to versatility. Moira and Seris have a couple similar abilities that are used quite differently, but Seris's abilities allow for a more varied playstyle. When going against a Seris, you could be up against a heal bot, a damage support, or a flank who's always in your backline. Moira can definitely do all three as well, but she does them to a smaller degree at the same time. In my opinion, in hero shooters, it's better to be really good at one role rather than fill multiple roles halfway. I love that both champs revolve around lifesteal. I just think Seris does it better while giving her team more utility as opposed to straight up heals and damage. Not to mention, from a game design perspective, Seris takes more skill. Granted, she doesn't take a lot of skill, but you don't really have to aim with any of Moira's abilities except maybe her heal and an orb here or there. The winner of this episode of Paladins vs Overwatch is Seris, the Oracle of the Abyss.
Just as I foretold.
I hope you guys enjoyed this one. Hopefully it's going to be a kickstart to a lot more consistent output schedule in the future. Seris definitely holds a really special place in my heart, so I'm really happy to get this one out. If y'all want to see more of me, be sure to check out my other content here on YouTube and Twitch. I do Dead by Daylight and Paladins. I do have a TikTok, but like I don't do a lot of gaming content on there. We're Live Laugh Lovin'. Let me know what you guys thought, what your like opinions are. If you have any, I don't know, critiques, I'm here for them. And let me know who you'd like to see in one of these videos next. Without further ado though, let's announce who's going to be in the next video.
You don't want to go to war with me. You messed with the wrong guy.
Okay, bye, see you, bye.